Steve Smith. It is Friday, June 18th at about 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We are about to get started learning about Azure Identity. We're going to start looking at Azure AD, and we might take a look at Azure AD B to C today, or that might be left for another stream. We'll see how far we get. Let me go ahead and give us a minute to get some people in here before we get started in earnest. Hopefully sound is coming through. Let me just do a quick sound check. That looks good. All right, and we are live. All right, so let's switch our view here for just a second and welcome everybody. I do need to mention a couple of housekeeping items as we get started here. I'm hoping that some of you will follow up after this call or after this show rather, and learn more about this. There's a couple of things that you should see. First off, this is a sponsored stream, so you might notice I've got some logos and things up above me, and I decided to throw my MVP logo down here at the bottom. The show is being sponsored by Microsoft Azure, and so we need everyone to please observe the code of conduct. This mainly applies to the chat, which generally you would follow that anyway if you're participating in Twitch's code of conduct. Later on YouTube, I'll be sure to moderate any comments that are not appropriate. I also want to ask everyone to take a moment to check out the 425 show and learn more about some of the resources that are there. I'm going to go ahead and show you the homepage here in just a second, but I would appreciate it if sometime during the stream you go ahead and click the link that you see here, and I'll throw it in the chat as well, so that you can just see what's there. This is one of the things that they're evaluating as part of their sponsorship is to see, like, does anyone actually click on the links that are here? So if you click on it, that would be helpful. So there it is in the chat. And with that, I'm done with slides. So yay. Let me go ahead and finish my slideshow here. Boom. This is what is at the 425 show. There's a trailer here you can watch real quick to see what it's all about. It has some resources, particularly around ASP.NET Identity with Azure. And down here you'll also find a list of upcoming activities and shows. Here's me right now doing Identity. So let's get started. All right, so today there's a few quick starts on here. And my goal is to work through these quick starts with you, answer any questions you might have in the chat as we're going through. I am not an expert at Azure Identity. In fact, you're going to be learning with me as I kind of stumble through this and learn. If I find any issues with the documentation where I get stuck, I may post an issue, or even if there's like a typo or something, I may show you how to fix things in the docs, which you can do yourself in GitHub because it's all open source. But basically, we're going to take a tour of how the documentations tell us to get started with Azure Identity when you're building an ASP.NET Core app. Now, once we get through the quick start, which is using basically a pre-built project for you, then we'll see if we have time to try and apply this to an existing ASP.NET Core application, which will obviously take a little bit more effort since it won't have everything kind of pre-built for us. But that's basically the goal for today's stream. If it's something that you've been thinking about but you haven't had a chance to learn, which it basically has been for me, then this is a good chance for you to kind of see somebody else go through it, and you'll have an idea of what's involved if you are trying to learn it yourself. A good tip, if you're watching this later on YouTube and you're in a hurry, you can just watch this at ×1.5 or ×2 speed. And yes, I will talk really, really quickly, but you'll be able to see all the content and all the things that we do in less time. So it's like a superpower. You can go faster. All right, let's get started and just kind of go through the documentation here. So, oh look, the 425 show is now hosting us and is rating us. So thank you, Microsoft Developer, for the raid. That's totally unexpected, but appreciated. So now we've jump started our information here. So our stream, our audience here. Hey, Christoph, how's it going? Welcome. Got a couple new followers. Thanks for the follow. Just to back up for a moment, since we do have a few new people joining, I'll just bring my PowerPoint deck up here. A couple of things. First, This is being sponsored by Microsoft Azure. We're going to be learning about Microsoft Azure AD and identity. And if you aren't already aware of the 425 show, go to 425show.dev and check it out, which I'm guessing since a few of you are rating from their Twitch channel, you're probably already familiar with it. But for anyone who's not, there you go. Okay, a bunch of you following. Hey, Rob Windsor, how's it going? Rocketman2112, TeamJR75, thanks all for the follows. All right, so we're going to go through these docs together and kind of see how things work. So in this initial quick start, I'll throw you the link in chat so you can grab it, and these will be in the notes afterward. There's my chat. Here we are. Boom. We're basically going to get started with building an ASP.NET Core app that uses Azure AD for its security and authentication. So in this quick start, you download and run a code sample, demonstrates how this ASP.NET Core app would work using sign-in from Azure Active Directory or Azure AD. Okay. Now there's a couple of different flavors of Azure AD. There's also Azure AD B2C or business to consumer, and we're not going to get into that just yet. But this is the first step is that we're going to work with Azure Active Directory specifically for this quick start. All right, and it's pretty short. You can see from the scroll bar here how long it is, but we'll get through it in just a few minutes, I think. So the initial step here is we're going to kind of understand this diagram that shows us how this works. And so the user, when they authenticate using an external provider, they're not just going to log into your site. So if you're familiar with the built-in ASP.NET Core identity stuff, where you're hosting the usernames and the passwords in your own database, and when they log in, you're basically just using Entity Framework to talk to that database and verify their credentials yourself. When you're using a third party for identity, there needs to be a jump to that third-party provider as part of the exchange that occurs when they first log in. And so that's what it's showing you here in this first diagram. It's saying the user is going to come to your site, and they're going to try and access something that requires a password, or they're just going to click on the login button. Either way. When that occurs, they're going to get redirected. And so the browser or the server is going to send back a 301 typically response. It's going to say, hey, I need you to go here. Right, so this return number 2 with the redirect, it's not actually redirecting you, it's just telling you where to go, right? And then the browser is generally going to follow those. So typical browser behavior is anytime I run into a redirect, I'm going to go ahead and just automatically follow it. So the user doesn't have to do anything, but they immediately find themselves at a new website, which is going to be on the Microsoft Identity platform, and it's going to ask them for their credentials. Now, when they enter in their credentials correctly, then it's going to come back with another redirect URL, but this time it's also going to provide them with an access token. And then they'll be able to redirect back to your site. So notice this arrow jumps around and all the way back up to the original site. And that's going to have that access token, which your site will look at and say, yep, that looks good. And it'll grant them access now into the site as an authenticated user. All right, so some prerequisites for this sample, Visual Studio 2019 or VS Code. We're actually going to use a preview version of Visual Studio 2022 that just came out yesterday and see how that works. Then we're going to use .NET Core SDK 3.1 or better. I believe I'm probably going to be using .NET 5, but we'll see the sample code may bring us back to 3.1 or something else. All right, so register and download the app. You have two options. This is interesting. I went through this the other day, and it was kind of cool how it'll set this up for you. So you have two options to get the sample app that we're going to work with. The first one is automatic configuration. So you go to this Azure portal page where you want to register your app. You enter in whatever the name is for your app, and then you click register. And on the server, they're going to actually configure this application for you with all the bits in the configuration settings that you need, and then wrap that up in a zip file and let you download it. And so when you download that zip file, it's going to be specific to this application that you're registering. If you want to do it manually, then you have to follow these steps. And we could probably show both of these here just so you can see what the difference is. So let's try that. Let's go ahead and go to the Azure portal for Azure App Registration. We'll open that in a new tab. It's going to redirect us in here and say, here's our registered application. And we want this to be apps for any organization, and we need to give it a name. So let's say it's, I I don't need you to help me out there, but we're going to call this Azure AD Twitch stream, let's say, and we'll register this app. All right, so now we're in the quick start, and we have a couple options. We can say, let me make this a little bigger for you. We need to configure this so that it has these redirect URIs, and we also want to make sure that it has the settings that we need for it to have. So we're going to say make this change for me, so it's going to be automatic, and so it's going to take these URIs and put them in there, and we'll say, all right, make those updates. So it's configuring the app, and then we'll download the code sample. Now, I downloaded this already before, so I'm not sure if it's going to give me the same file name as it had before, but we'll go find this thing in our folder, and I'm going to go open this up. It is different. All right. Open this up in an Azure Samples folder that I've got. So go here. And we'll extract it. You can't see this, but I'm just extracting it into a folder. And so this is what it looks like now inside the folder. We're in Active Directory something something folder that I created, and then in here is the actual application that it just downloaded. And in this, there's going to be a solution file here, this web app openidconnect.net. That's what we're going to open to check it out. And so I'm going to go ahead and open up Visual Studio, and I want to make sure I open up the preview one. So we're going to do Visual Studio 2022 preview, and then we're going to open a project or solution, and that's going to be, I'll show you. So you can see we're in a preview version of Visual Studio, and we're going to Active Directory, and there's our solution file. So we'll open that up, and then we'll just bring Visual Studio up here. We're not using Git at the moment, so just get our Solution Explorer visible. Try to do that anyway. All right, so we have downloaded it. I don't need Package Manager or Properties, and that can go away. Okay, so in here, we have a simple MVC application. If we take a look at the project, you can see it's NetCore 3.1, and it has pulled in some settings here for us that have some information on how it needs to be configured to work. And so I think out of the box we can run it, but let me verify that. We'll come back here, and it says enter the name, follow the instructions, automatically configure, and then download it, which we just did, I think, and then configure it. So extract the zip file, did that. C:/Azure samples, that's actually the folder I used. You do want to be careful if you put it into a deeply nested folder. It could cause issues with the length of the path, especially because the folder names that it's using are pretty long too, because the file name is Active Directory, ASP.NET Core, Web App, OpenID Connect v2 ASP.NET Core 3-1. Like, that's pretty long, and then it adds it in a couple places. So, recommend you start it in a close to root folder so the path isn't too long. Okay. Now open it, open app settings, JSON, modify the code, enter in the domain of your tenant and your application ID and your tenant ID here. We can leave tenant ID as common if we want it to be used for any organization. And when we automatically configured this, it kind of set that for us. So that's already set. If we look in our Visual Studio here again, you see tenant ID is common. Client ID was set for us as well. Domain I could set to be some domain. I don't really have one. I don't think I need one just yet for this to actually work as a demo. And so really I don't think we have to change anything because we did the automatic configuration. The only one I would want to change probably is the domain to be the real domain of whatever I would deploy this to. Alright, now we can build and run the application and just do F5 or Control F5, and it should prompt us for credentials. Now why is it going to do that? Well, first, before we run it, let's go take a look at what's going to make that happen. So In here, there is a simple home controller that displays the index. And so when it goes to load the home page, normally that would just work and it would show you whatever the home page had. And if we go look into views, index.cshtml, this is what we expect to see. It's going to say welcome. It's going to have a link to the docs and show us how to build apps with ASP.NET Core. And that's it, right? That's pretty simple. But it's not actually going to show us that unless we're logged in, and that's because there is an authorized attribute on this controller. And the authorized attribute is basically going to say, if we don't know who you are, you can't get to this content. And so by putting that on the controller, every action inside of that controller, which in this case is the index and the privacy page, and the error page too, for that matter, requires this authorization. Now, the error page will actually work without authorization, and that's because they kind of poke a hole in that rule by using the allow anonymous filter. And so that allows you to say, even though everything else here is supposed to require authentication, I'm going to say that this one you can get to even if you're anonymous, even if we don't know who you are. All right, so let's go ahead and run it. So I'm going to hit Control F5, and it should run in a browser that's on this same shared screen, I hope. And there it is. And you can see that we're redirecting, right? If you follow these redirects, you'll see that it's sending us somewhere else. And it's got our app name right here. So it says the app is unverified, but it does have the name that we use. It's Azure AD. Twitch stream needs your permission to view your basic profile. Accepting these things means that you're going to allow the app to use the data specified in terms of service and privacy statement. Publisher has not provided links to their terms for you. Maybe there's a way for me to do that. I don't know. But we're going to say yes. I will share my email with my own app here that I've created. And that should be all we need to do, right? Now we're logged in. Now, since we're logged in, and since I said yes, you could share my email, notice it doesn't just say, hello, some random AD user is now here, but it actually knows who I am. It knows that I've logged in as steve@kensmiths.com, which is one of my Microsoft accounts. So there we go. And yeah, it was fast. Someone on the chat saying that was fast. Like, that's it. Like that's all you got to do to get started. So let's go back to the docs real quick. Which are actually still in the browser here. So here's our quick start, and they're not lying about the quick part, right? When they configure everything for you, there's not much left to do. And so after you consent to the permissions, you should see this. Kendall@Kentoso on Microsoft.com. We saw mine. You'll see yours, and that's it, right? Now, next, let's learn a little bit about how this all works. And we'll kind of see what the plumbing is, because if you want to apply this to your own ASP.NET Core application, you need to know what you need to change to wire this up. So inside of the configure services method inside of startup, that's where the host process starts up and where you configure everything. And if you're building ASP.NET Core apps, you're probably very familiar with the startup class. And inside of configure services, we need to do a couple of things to wire it up to work with Azure AD and to configure just general authentication. So there's an add authentication line here, and this is basically going to say that we want to add cookie-based authentication, and it's used in browsers, and it's set the challenge to use OpenID Connect is what the docs are telling us here. We'll be able to see that in a second when I switch back to that browser. We'll look at the cookies and see what was created for us when we set this up. Then the line that contains add Microsoft Identity Web App right here adds Microsoft Identity Platform Authentication to the application. Right. So this first line, notice it has OpenID Connect defaults authentication scheme, and that's what it's talking about here. That's saying it's going to use OpenID with cookie-based auth, and then it's going to further configure that to use Microsoft Identity. And then in here, it's grabbing something from configuration. We already saw that. That's inside the app settings JSON file. And that's where it's grabbing a section called Azure AD. So if we look at that code over here, and we jump back to our app settings.json, this is that Azure AD section. That's how it knows which section to read. You can use that same configuration style for your own config sections as well, but it's a good practice to group things that are relevant into their own sections. And so for Azure AD, this is all the information that was required to configure how that was going to work. All right, back into the quick start. The application is configured to sign in users based on following information in your Azure AD section in App Settings. And so the client ID is a GUID that basically refers to the application that you registered in the Azure portal. So when I went in and I gave it that Azure Twitch AD stream name as the application ID, that was associated with this GUID that we see in App Settings. This instance is the endpoint to use to log in. So this is what they're going to redirect to whenever you need to log in. And so that's login.microsoftonline.com is the default, and that is in fact what we have here as well. All right, and then the tenant ID, the name of your tenant or tenant ID, or common to sign in users with their Microsoft personal accounts. And so I just used common, which means anyone that has a Microsoft account can just log in. That'd be the same as if I were going to allow some other OpenID client like Stack Overflow or GitHub or Twitter. They could log in and come into this if I gave them access. I'd have to add them as a separate provider. But in the context of using Microsoft and using Azure AD here, it's basically saying if anyone is using Microsoft Identity with their own account, even if they're not part of my organization, they can log in with that. And so that's why I didn't have to register myself with this app. I was able to log in because I'd previously configured an account with Microsoft through Windows Live ID and creating a Microsoft account. Way back in the day, it was Passport, right? I've had this same account for quite a while. Okay, so then let's keep reading. So in the configure method, there's two important methods. One that says use authentication and one that says use authorization. And those are enabled with their named functionality. So what is their named functionality? Well, authentication basically means who are you? And so when we authenticate, we want to know that you're not just some random anonymous person, but that we can identify you're this specific individual. You are, John Doe or Steve Smith or whomever. And then authorization is related. Authorization is, okay, now that I know who you are, what are you authorized to do? What are you allowed to do? And so authorization depends on authentication generally. So you need to know who they are so you can establish, do they have certain characteristics or claims, or do they belong to certain roles or teams or groups that would give them access to certain resources or not. And so we need both of those in order for the application to function properly with its security and identity features. Also in the configure method, you must register Microsoft Identity Web Routes with at least one call to endpoints.mapControllerRoute or a call to map controllers. So all that is saying is that we need to make sure that our MVC app is actually configured to use MVC, and it's going to use the newer endpoint routing feature that's been around since I think ASP.NET Core 3 something. I think that was introduced then. But now with .NET 5 being around for a little while, this is pretty much the standard way that you would configure routing inside your apps these days. You wouldn't necessarily use a routing table like this one, but like they're saying up here, you can just say map controllers. So if we come into startup and we look at this code here in our app, we see it's the same code that they're showing us in the docs. So right here's our add authentication with OpenID Connect defaults. Here's grabbing the Azure AD section. In services, we need to add support for controllers. You could, in older versions of ASP.NET Core, you would just say add MVC, and that would include support for APIs and Razor pages and everything else. Now we're being more specific, and we're saying add controllers with views and add Razor pages here. We don't actually have any Razor pages, but if we wanted to add some, we could, because we've configured support for them here. Okay. This is saying require authenticated users with our authorization policy. We're going to track down where this policy is. Actually, it's right here. All right, so you can use policies. This is another feature of ASP.NET Core. It's unrelated to Azure AD, but policies allow you to just specify, policies for authentication so that you don't have to put in a bunch of extra details everywhere in your system. So right now, we just have this one controller. And this one controller has this authorized attribute on it, but you could add additional things to this and say, well, we have this authorized attribute and it's using this scheme and it requires these roles and it has other things that you can specify here. But one of the things you can specify is simply a policy. And so if you have a lot of granular logic that you want to apply as part of your authorization, you can bake all that into one or more policies and then just specify the policy here inside of your individual attributes. However, you don't have to apply these attributes at the code level in individual controllers. You can actually do them globally. And so each one of these attributes represents a filter in MVC. And so what we're doing here is we're creating a policy, and then instead of applying it to that authorized attribute on the controller, we are just adding it as a filter globally to all of the requests made to any controllers. And so that's what that policy is doing. It's saying we're going to require an authenticated user everywhere, right? Unless something says allow anonymous, it's going to use that filter to force them to authenticate so it knows who they are. And then for add razor pages, they're just adding Microsoft Identity UI. So if I configure this to use razor pages, I think that's going to automatically give me some login pages and stuff. I haven't used that in a while, so I'm not sure exactly what that will do for me. But I don't think it's required for any of the stuff we're doing to work. Okay, so then in the configure section, we made sure to add these two bits of middleware, and I already covered them, authentication and authorization. And then we have this mapping that's going to support razor pages, and it's going to support controllers with these default routes. And the doc said that we should be able to just say endpoints.map controllers. I think map controllers, and I think that would do it as well. Right. So if we got rid of this and ran it, I think everything would still work. Cannot find a page. Maybe it won't still work. All right, fine. Oh, you know what? That's because map controllers is the one that you use for APIs. That's what I'm misremembering. All right, there's a way to do it so it works with views, but we just won't try breaking that just yet because there's other things we want to get to. So having fixed that back the way it was, I know there's a different way to do that, but be that as it may, now it's working again. All right. Now, we haven't shown us how to sign out, so that's built in as well. So when we sign out, if you look at the status here, it's going to /Microsoft Identity /account /signout, and that tells me one piece I was thinking about here. So okay, when we look at this add Microsoft Identity UI, what that's doing is it's making it so we can use that sign out link that I just showed. So this page here that you get when you sign out is going to a /Microsoft Identity route that doesn't actually exist inside of our app, but it's supported because we have added support for it with that configuration. So now when we sign out, we go to our app and then we redirect out here and we say, sure, sign me out, and now I'm signed out. And it says close all your things, sure. And then we'll come back to the app once more, which I think is still running, and we'll go to localhost : whatever the port was, was it 44321? I think it was 44321. Try that, and now it wants me to log in, and this time I need to. I'm going to log in with my personal account and sign in, and now I'm back in. All right, so that gets everything working, and I think that basically completes the exercise. Now, if we wanted to do that again with configuration ourselves, instead of letting it auto-configure it, I think the only thing that would be different is that when we get to this app settings, we're going to have to pull these things out ourselves. So let's give that a shot and just see how bad that is, because I don't think it's all that bad. We'll zoom up here to the top. We'll skip the automatic configuration. We'll do the manual configuration. And so it says sign into Azure portal, which we've done once now, but let's clear that out of there and do it again. And I'm already signed in. It'll sign us back in again. I lost my link though. Let's go. Oh no, I have to start. Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. It's not that I went to a different link. It's just taking us to a different page. So instead of going to the Azure portal page registration automatically, you have to sign in yourself and then go and create the different tenants that you need and pick your subscription and all that stuff. So I don't have a login that I want to use for that, so I'm going to skip that for this point. but let's just kind of review what the steps are for just a moment. So you can search for Azure Active Directory, which I don't have configured, and then manage app registration. So you want a new registration, give it a name like this ASP.NET Core Quick Start. Specify what you want your redirect to be, and in this case we'll say that 44321, and register it, and then under manage it select authentication, specify a logout, which will be the same as this one but sign out instead of sign in, and then under implicit grant say you want ID tokens and select save. Alright, so those would be the steps, and I don't think that would be that bad. Now before we leave this, I did want to point out how the cookies are working. So let me sign out again and jump back to localhost 44321, but with a browser tools open. So open those up, and then we'll go 44321. We'll hit this, and we should see, where's the requests? There. These requests, I need to say all. There we go. So we hit localhost, and we got back a response that was a 302, not a 301, because it's temporary, I guess. 302 redirect, and the response header gives us a location in the header to say where to go. And it's sending us to login.microsoft.com using OAuth2, giving our client ID, and a redirect URI that says where should we go when we're done. So when we're all done, it's going to send us to http://localhost 44321 sign in OIDC. So you can see that right there. That's where it's going to come back to. The response type is to provide an ID token. The scope is OpenID profile. Response mode is form post. There's a nonce, which is part of the protocol for this OpenID Connect that we're using, and a whole bunch of other metadata that gets appended on here. So this is the state that has some data embedded in it. All right, and so then we're going to go ahead and sign in. We'll say next. We'll say use the personal account, and it's already logged in. I guess it's not because I signed out. So then we'll sign in, and now it redirects here. So if we jump down here, let's see. Here's where we redirected to sign in OIDC with a post, and then that redirected us back to localhost. So in the response for this, where's it down here? It's going to give us the here's the form data that came in, right? So here's the ID token that was provided, and then there's some additional information. Here's that state that we saw that gets passed around, but this ID token is what the application is going to get back, that they're going to verify that that looks good, that that's correct. And I'm pretty sure this ID token we can decrypt with an online tool. Let me see if I can copy that value, and I think we can go look at it here. I haven't tried this in a while. If we go here and we Control A, Control V, and get rid of some, did I have extra? No, I didn't. All right. Yeah, so here is actually what's in that ID token. So this is something you can do if you're trying to diagnose how this is working, or if you want to just see what's actually being passed around as part of this message exchange. Up here is the header. Tells us it's a JWT web token. Algorithm is RS-256. And down here it has some version. It says who issued it. So there's the issuer, which is login@microsoft.com. That 9188, do we know what that is? That's not my client ID, so I'm not sure what that is. We're 769. So there's some link there. I'm not sure what it represents. Here's our AUD, that's our audience, which is that 769 GUID for the client ID. How we can convert it into a JWT. I didn't convert anything. I just there's a question in the chat from More Yeti asking how to convert into JWT. If you just go into your browser tools and take a look at what came back into the sign-in OIDC, you'll see this ID token. You can right-click on it and just copy it directly as is. Go to a tool to decode these. There's a few of these online. Microsoft has one as well. This is just the one I'm used to going to because it's got a really short URL. But you go to jot.io. This JWT, it's a lot faster if you say jot, so that's what a lot of folks say when they're talking about it. And then if you paste it in here, it'll show you the decoded version and whether or not it's valid. Okay, so then the expiration is in seconds since Unix epoch, and so this is when this token expires. This is when it was issued. This is when it's not valid before. So there's various security attacks that can do things to make it so that you can take a token and try and use it with a different timestamp. And so this one is saying that you can't use this one before a certain time, which is separate from when it was issued. In this case, it's the same. Right? It was issued at this time, 1327 daylight time, and you can't use it before 1327:31 daylight time, Eastern Daylight Time. It's for me. So this is when it asks, hey, do you want to share this information with this other application? Here's what it was sharing, right? It's sharing my name and it's sharing my email address, which is the preferred username. I could change that preferred username, but I can't change it here because that would invalidate this token. I would have to go change it in Azure AD. So well, not Azure AD directly, but in this case, with my Microsoft account. So on my Microsoft account, if there was somewhere that I could specify my preferred username and say I wanted to be Ardalis or S Smith, that would change this. That got returned back. If you've worked with Identity Server, you end up dealing with these things quite a bit with access tokens and identity tokens, and a lot of these same protocols. Okay, then there's the OID. One of the nice things about this particular tool is that it tells you what these little three-letter acronym things are. Like right now, I'm drawing a blank on what OID stands for, and I was hoping it would help me, but I don't think it does. And TID, I forget what those two are. There's our nonce, that's the unique value associated with this token, and then AIO, I'm drawing a blank on what that one was right now too. This will also tell you if the signature is valid. So if we look at this token over here on the left, the text here, you see these colors, and there's dots in here. And the dots are important, right? You don't see the dots easily here, right? It's just a wall of text here. But the debugger will show you there's a header, and then there's a dot, and then there's the rest of it, and I just screwed that up. Hang on, let me undo that. So there's a header, then there's a dot, and then there's the payload, which is the data, and then there's a signature, right? Now the reason why I can't just go and arbitrarily change this and say, hey, I want my username to be Ardalis, let's say, and then somehow I don't know if it'll let me pull this back over here. I don't think it will. Is there a way to do that? Well, yeah, it's not showing it back here, but it is telling me it's an invalid signature, right? And the reason is because this signature is a hash of the header and the payload. So if you make any changes to this, if I was like, well, actually it's not expired yet, let's make it last a little bit longer, right? Then the signature would be invalid, and the website that was trying to use this for identity would kick you out and say, hey, you're not authorized, your token's invalid, and send me back to, in this case, log in on MicrosoftConnect.com to re-authenticate. All right, now theoretically, if I can get that back to what it said before, Steve at kentsmiths.com, then the token signature should be valid again. I must not have gotten it quite right. Let's just paste everything back in here. Start it over. It looks like I got it right. But now you can see the signature is valid. Ilario is helping me out. He's got the docs link. Let me go ahead and grab this and open it. This is from the chat. So there's the Microsoft Identity Platform ID tokens, and it talks about the fact that we're using OAuth and OpenID Connect protocols. And here's what some sample tokens look like. Here's what's in the header, what the different claims are with these three-letter, generally acronyms. They're not always acronyms, but they're always three-letter codes. And then here's a bunch of optional things you can specify in here. So OID is the immutable identity for an object, an identifier for an object in the Microsoft Identity System. In this case, a user account. And what was the other one? TID. TID is a GUID that represents Azure ID tenant that the user is from. So for work and school accounts, it's the immutable tenant ID. For personal accounts, this is 9188. So I'm pretty sure that's what we were seeing, which was here, and we saw it was 9188, etc., etc. Yeah, so that's it. Thanks a lot. Now then, the other thing is Mr. Matskis is telling us that TID is important in multi-tenant apps. as well. So if we specify a tenant that's not common, for instance, then this will be important here to know which tenant you are authenticating as, because you could set this up to have a multi-tenant system. Maybe you have I don't know, let's say a chat program or a forum program, and other people can register to have their own company's chat or their own company's forum application, and they can, kind of brand it however they want, sort of white labeling it, so it looks like it's their thing. Then they would each have their own tenant system, and this tenant ID would say that, hey, when you log in to application one dot whatever.com, they can log in against application one. That doesn't mean that they can take that same token and go log into application two, even though they're both running on the same web server. They're both running on the same architecture. So that's where this tenant ID matters. Now we specified common back when we did this, and that's what made it so that this is going to work with just the general Microsoft ID types. All right, so I think that's enough coverage of that. Well, we didn't get to the actual cookie. So what happens when we then log in? Let's come back here, right? And then we get to localhost and we look at the cookies, and we have a ASP.NET Core identity cookie right here, and this is the cookie that has the information, and I'm pretty sure that that's just the token. Let me see if I can copy that. Let's see, show request, sort by. You're not going to let me grab the value, are you? Copy. Let's see. I don't know if that's the same as this. It was, you can't see the header of it. That's EYJ0. I don't think it is. So this is something else. Right, so that's not, I didn't copy the whole thing, but it's definitely something else. So in this cookie, this is I believe an encrypted identity token that Microsoft Identity uses for ASP.NET Core Identity, and that's just your session cookie, and that says, hey, you're logged in, and that's we specified that, and we said that we were going to use the OpenID defaults to use cookie authentication. Now, if we delete this, which I'm not sure I can do from here, but I can definitely do from application cookies. Yeah, I can't do it from there because I was on the actual request. In here, we want the ASP.NET Core Identity Application cookie. We can take this out and just wipe it out and say delete. And then if we go back to the home page up here, it did not kick us out. That's interesting. So it must not be the right one. Or it's also in this one, perhaps. Let me delete that one too. It's doing it for the right URL, and that nuked it. Yeah. So once we took out this other .ASP.NET Core, oh wait, no, it still loaded us. It brought it back. All right. So it knows that we're still authenticated somehow. Not sure where it's doing that. I know if we just nuke all the cookies and we clear them, that should do the trick, right? And we come in now, and it still knows who we are, and it recreated the cookie. How's that working? That is not what I expect. You would think if you clear the cookies, that would sign you out, except that I didn't sign out of Microsoft Identity, right? And that's part of why this is working. Okay, so this is different from when you have built-in identity in your system. We aren't clearing the cookie for Microsoft, right? And so remember when I went to log out here, and I said, hey, do you want to sign this account out? I'm now signing out of this other domain. And so what's happening behind the scenes, and we're not seeing it because I didn't have the network tab open, is when I try to log in here and I've cleared my cookies, I haven't signed out of Microsoft, of my Microsoft account. And so it's doing that handshake behind the scenes. So without signing out, let's go back. Let's see that in action. All right, so we're going to come here, we're going to clear the cookies, come back to network tab and clear all this. And let's see what happens if I say go to home. All right, so right away, you see we said go to localhost, which is my request to home, and it said, hey, go authorize. And so it didn't show me this really, but it did a redirect right here, the 302, and it's really fast, so you don't necessarily see it as a user. And it says, hey, go see is this person allowed to come here, and it returns back very quickly here, and it says, yep, I've got them, they're still logged in, here's their token. And so then that created the cookie, and then it redirected back and actually loaded. So clearing out the cookies, even though that's usually enough to get you logged out of a system. In this case, it's not, because I didn't clear out the cookies for the thing that was authenticating me, in this case, the Microsoft account. So that's interesting. Now, the other thing to check, I think, if I go somewhere else, let's go to Microsoft account, let's see, log out. I think if I log out here, sign out of Microsoft account, will that do it? How do I do it? Send me there. I think if I sign out to the Microsoft account online somewhere, that cookie might still keep me around for a little while before it realizes that I've actually signed out of the Microsoft account. But that's going pretty far off the rails on my demo here, so I'll skip that. All right, so Morieti, one of the users in chat here, is asking, how does it know which user it is? And it's because it knows, because I have a cookie for Microsoft, right? So when I say sign out, let's bring tools back here, and I say sign out, and it brings me here. Now I'm in login at Microsoft.com. We go to application, cookies there. I have all these cookies, right, that say it knows who I am from login.live. So when I cleared my cookie, I didn't clear my cookie on login.live.com. I only cleared my cookie on localhost. And so when localhost redirects me back out to this Microsoft Online and login.live.com domain, it still sees me here as steve@kensmiths.com, Steve Smith. That's all in the cookies on those other domains. So if I had said clear all my cookies in the browser, then it wouldn't know who I was. But I only cleared the cookies for that one domain, and that's why it didn't totally wipe me out. All right. So good questions. And there's some nuance here, right? Like, this is a different way of logging in. If you're used to just having a standalone application that has identity built into it, using ASP.NET Core Identity, and it's got tables in your own database that you're working with, it's a different way to think about authentication when you're delegating the authority to determine whether or not someone is authenticated to a third party. In this case, to Azure Active Directory. All right, so that's enough on that for now. Let's go back to our quick start, and I think we got through everything here, right? I don't see if anybody has any questions. Now's a good time in the chat to ask them. But if not, I'm going to move on to the next quick start, because there's another thing that you commonly need to do in your web applications these days, and that is not just to authenticate using cookies for a user to be able to work with the web application pages, but also to be able to authenticate, to be able to use APIs that are being hosted by that application. And APIs, typically you don't want to set up with cookie authentication. You want to use a different approach. And so we'll see how that works in the next demo. All right, so last chance for any other questions on this. I'll throw this in the chat one more time. And now is probably a good time to remind everybody that they should go check out the 425 Show website. Look for additional activities coming up where they can learn more about these kinds of things. I'll throw that in the chat as well. As Microsoft Azure is sponsoring this stream, we want to make sure we send them some support. But now I want to jump to this next quick start. And for this one, we're doing something different, right? We're going to be looking at APIs. And honestly, most of the ASP.NET Core code that I write these days is APIs. Just about every application businesses are building these days is some kind of single-page application, or it's a mobile app, or it's running Blazor. And so the need for APIs has never been bigger. It's actually sort of the exception that folks are building, in my experience with my clients, that folks are building things using web forms or MVC with Razor or Razor pages. Those are used for read-only things. Those might be used sometimes for maybe reports or just static content. But when it comes to an interactive application that's manipulating data, more and more companies are going to smart client applications that are using some variation of a single page application architecture, whether that's Angular or React or Vue or Blazor. All those things run in the browser. And if you're building mobile apps, then they run on the device of your mobile app. And then they need to communicate with some back end server in order to get their data, and that's where these APIs come into play. Now, you can use a variety of different authentication mechanisms to talk to APIs, and you can use cookies for that authentication, but it's not generally the preferred approach, and there's some reasons for that that I won't get into. But generally, the preferred way that you're going to interact with APIs on the back end these days is going to be through the use of tokens. And so we already looked at JOT tokens for identity. There are also another form of token, which is an access token. And you use the same tools that I showed, and I'm sure I'll show them again in a minute, to work with those tokens and to inspect them and see what kind of claims they include. But then your application, with each request it gets, it will have that token attached, usually as a header, and it will be able to see whether or not that request is authorized. All right, so I'm going to shut down my web app that was running, and let's go through this quick start. The other quick start was really fast, right? Like it was true to its name that it was quick. So this one says it's a 4-minute read, and we'll see how long it takes to get the sample running. All right, so in this quick start, we're going to download an ASP.NET Core Web API code sample and review the way it restricts resource access to authorized accounts only. This sample supports authorization of personal Microsoft accounts, which is great. We'll do the same thing we did before, as well as accounts in any Azure AD organization. Now, at some point, maybe in the next stream, we'll look at how to create your own Azure AD organization, which is something that you might need to do for your application or for your actual org. In this example, we're going to keep it simple. We're just going to use the built-in personal Microsoft account support. All right, so you have to have an Azure account with an active subscription. I do. You have to have an Azure Active Directory tenant. I think if I use common for that, I'll be good. I haven't actually tried this quick start before, so if there's hitches in it, they're going to be real, right? I need to have the Azure SDK. I do. You need to have Visual Studio. I do. I have the latest version. That's 2022 preview. And then let's go through the steps. So step 1, sign in to the Azure portal and start picking all the things you need to do. All right, so let me do that. We'll pop open the Azure portal, and I'm going to do a few of these steps here on this other screen just so I can use this account and get into what I need to do. So if you have access to multiple tenants, pick your subscription. Okay, and I'm good there. Use the directory and subscription filter in the top menu. Select the tenant which you want to register an application. Fine. Search for and select Azure Active Directory. There we go. Azure Active Directory. And now under Manage, select App Registrations, New Registration. Where's Manage? Did I skip a step? Search for under Manage. Alright, let's bring this back up here where you guys can see it. Where's Manage? Your role. Manage. I can create a tenant. Is that what I want? I don't think I want a tenant. Here's Manage. There's Manage. Alright, fine. So I found Manage. Under Manage, App Registrations, New Registrations. Wait on there. Thank you. Left nav. Thank Rob Windsor. Okay, now a new registration. Register an application. This is basically what we did before. So we're going to do Azure AD API Twitch, let's say. And we're going to do this for, I guess, anything like that. That's the same one I did before, I think. What's this one say? Quick start, name, register. It didn't ask me to change that, but I did. I wanted to change it. Let me follow this exactly. I don't want to jump ahead and change things. So under Manage, new registration, did that. For name, enter name of your app, did that. Users will see this. Okay, select register. All right, so this defaulted to single tenant of this app, which is still associated with the code project. I worked for the code project a few years ago, and so I've still got their name attached to some of my things, even though it's not really their stuff at this point. All right, so accounts in this organization directly, code project only, fine. Click register. Done. Now this is not going to work for my Microsoft default account, it sounds like. So that's fine. So then under select register, under manage, expose an API, add a scope for application ID URI, accept the default by selecting Save and Continue. So expose an API, add a scope. Expose an API right there. Add a scope right there. And take the default and say Save and Continue. Done. Okay. Selecting, and then enter the following details. All right, let's put these side by side. So Windows right and Windows left. There we go. And scroll back down to where we can see it. So scope name is access as user. Who can consent? Admins and users. Admin consent display name. Access, whatever my thing is called. ASP.NET Core Web API Quick Start. Yeah, it's fine. We'll use their name. It's still what it is, even though I named my app something else. Admin consent allows the app to access the thing as assigned user. Okay. So this is basically what's going to be displayed when the user goes to log in. User consent display name is this. And user consent description is this. State should be enabled, which it is. Select add scope. Alright, so now I have a scope, which is basically defining how we're going to access my API. So scopes that are defined by this API that we've set up. Now, download the ASP.NET Core solution from GitHub. So here's a link to github.com, Azure Samples, Active Directory.NET Native ASP.NET Core v2, ASP.NET Core 3.1.zip. Grab that. And let's go find this. And we'll go dump this into my Azure Samples folder. So this PC, downloads, Azure Samples, paste, extract. Done. Alright, and then we'll go open that with Visual Studio. So file, close, solution, and file, open a project. And we're in Azure Samples, and I guess I want this one. And I guess I want the solution. Alright, so back to the docs here. And the docs say, download the thing, and we're on step 3. Configure. In this step, configure the sample code to work with the app registration you created. Extract the zip into Azure Samples. That's what I did. And then we're going to open the Web API solution. Hey, I managed to find that without the directions. And then we're going to open the app settings JSON file and modify the code. Okay, so I need an application ID and a tenant ID. And this time I can't use the default tenant ID for common. Or I could if I wanted to change it here. But in this case, it's going to actually be the tenant ID for my organization that's configured on Azure. Now we may need to switch that back to common to get this to work because I haven't actually set up Azure AD for this to work. But we'll see if that's something I can do real quick. Alright, so in Visual Studio, let's go open this app up and find app settings JSON and see that it needs a client ID. And then we'll see if we can find that over here. And is that this? Where's our client ID? Application client ID. What is that? There's this. Expose an API. There's a scope. No client ID. Do I have to add a client? Authorizing a client. You're thinking I should go to overview, huh? Which is hidden by this alumni thing. Alright, there, overview. Client credentials, object ID, tenant ID, application client ID. I think it's that one. Alright, so we'll copy that. Thanks again, Rob Windsor. And we'll paste that here. And I'm pretty sure if I put common here, that'll be fine for general login. But let's try it with a tenant ID, and it's this one. And so it's going to be only people in the organization. Now, since my login to Azure is the same login as my Microsoft account, it's going to be basically the same, except I think instead of saying personal account, I'll say a business account, and we'll see if that works. But we'll get to that when we get to it. So Replace the tenant info with one of the following. If your application supports accounts in this organization directly only, which is what I set, then we replace this value with the directory tenant ID. You can find it from the overview page, which I did. Same with that. All right. The problem was that the search autocomplete was hiding the overview link. That's what I was struggling to look for it. If your application supports all these, we'll change it to common. So we'll try it without common, and then if we need to, we'll switch it back. All right, so what does the sample do? Well, the Web API receives a token from a client app, and the code in the Web API validates the token. This is described in more detail in the scenario here, which is just another docs page. I don't see where that is. We'll just pull that up here in a separate tab real quick. All right, this is pretty straightforward. So it's just basically covering how you protect a Web API with this access token. All right, we're not going to get distracted by that right now, though. We're going to continue to just go through what this thing's doing. So let's look at the startup in this one. It's very similar to the other application that we looked at, the web app, where we're going to specify in configure services the add authentication with jot bearer defaults this time. Now notice the other time, let's jump to this other one. We didn't use jot bearer defaults. We used, did I pass it up? I passed it up. Right there, we used OpenID Connect defaults. So the part that changed was not after the dot, it was before the dot, is the part to note. So we didn't use OpenID Connect defaults, we used the JWT bearer defaults for this. And essentially that means it's not going to be looking for cookies, right? It's going to be looking for a bearer token on the request. And then we specify to use, again, the Add Microsoft Identity Web API with our configuration section being Azure AD. Is that the same? I think that's basically the same, right? This time we did configuration.get section. So they're not quite identical. Can add Microsoft Identity Web App. And this is a Web API. So they're almost the same, but they're not exactly the same. All right, so add authentication adds the JWT bearer-based auth, and the add Microsoft Identity Web API adds Microsoft Identity Platform auth to your Web API. That's what you would expect. It is configured to validate access tokens issued by Microsoft Identity Platform based on the settings in your config file. Hey, C# Fritz just rated with 94 people. Awesome. Welcome everybody. FYI, we are just going over some Azure AD stuff with ASP.NET Core applications. Let me throw this slide up here real quick, and since we just got a bunch of new people join, we'll answer some quick questions if you have any. This is a sponsored stream from Microsoft Azure, and we're trying to promote the 425 show. So if you have a chance, if you haven't seen that before, and you want to go check it out, here's a link in the chat that you could use. And they're basically tracking whether or not their sponsorship is worthwhile based on how many people click on that. So feel free to click on it a few times. But on that page, what you'll find are a bunch of resources, and you can just watch this quick trailer sometime to see what's there, and learn more about what's coming from the folks there. So you got Christos is one of the hosts, and you can see the upcoming shows and stuff down here at the bottom, and also some upcoming Twitch streams, including this one that's happening right now. So you can check all that out. So what you've missed so far, thanks for the follow, a couple of you, XCACE, Xarius, Callow Creation. What we've been working on is how to add Microsoft AD, Azure AD auth to an ASP.NET Core app, and basically just following the docs, right? There's some nice quick starts out there. We went through the first one and kind of dug into how the network protocol works and how the cookies work between that, and how you can log in and what the redirect chain looks like. And now we're kind of doing the same thing, but instead of trying to authenticate an app that's just a web application with controllers and views or pages, now we're moving into APIs. And so we just got started, so you haven't really missed anything. And if you want to see how you're going to set up Azure AD to issue tokens to secure your web APIs, then stick around, because that's what we're covering now. All right. Now, I have not spent an exhaustive amount of time practicing demos and working on this. So this is real. This is me going through this pretty much for the first time on this. So that if I get confused and I'm not sure where things are, that's because I haven't done this before. So hopefully you'll appreciate learning by seeing someone who's actually doing it for the first time as opposed to someone that knows all the tricks. Okay, so here's where we got in this document. We're seeing from the sample that we just downloaded, which I have here in brand new Visual Studio 2022 preview, which you can download now, by the way. In here, we've opened this up. We're looking at the startup.cs and seeing how this sample is configured. Now, we haven't actually run it yet, and we'll get to that in a minute. But we're looking at the services that it uses, and then in a second, we're going to look at the middleware that it uses to provide this authentication support for your web API. So in here, configure services is pretty simple. We're wiring this up with JWT bearer defaults, so that's saying it's going to look for tokens, not cookies, and it's going to pull the data it needs from this Azure AD configuration section. And that's interesting. This doesn't actually match the doc, right? So this one says configuration get section Azure AD, and the doc said configuration comma Azure AD. I wonder if that works. I bet that doesn't work. So maybe we did find a bug in the docs. Let's try it. All right, so let's go over here. We'll hit Control D to duplicate that, which is a nice keyboard shortcut to know. And then we're going to replace this with that, and it says, hey, that doesn't work, but I got too many parentheses, so maybe that's why it doesn't work. So how about, hey, does that work? And it looks like it does. All right, so either way works, I think. And that's because configuration is this property, and so if we say, hey, load it from configuration, we get some overloads here, so we can pass in configuration and then the section, or we could just pass in the thing with the options, it looks like, right there. All right, so either one works, let's assume. Just in case they don't, I'm going to bring it back to the way it was to start. But I noticed that disparity between the two documentation pages is that they did them different ways. All right, so then in here, when we look at that section, the Azure AD section, it's right here. And we wired this up earlier. The instance is set for us automatically. We don't have to change that. Because we're using Azure AD, it's using Azure, it's going to always go to login.microsoftonline.com. Domain, we would set this to be whatever our real domain was if this were a live hosted application. The client ID we fetched from Azure. So I just, before a bunch of you arrived, I just created this new Active Directory Azure AD API Twitch here, and it has this display name, and it has this client ID F93, and it has this tenant ID 6F7, and those are the two things that we put in here, the F93 and the 6F7 for the tenant. Now in the previous demo that we did for tenant ID, we specified just common here, and this is not valid syntax, but this is what was here. Instead of this GUID, there was this common, and if you do that, then anyone that has a personal Microsoft account is able to log in. So if you just need to be able to let it work with anyone, and not just members of a particular Active Directory group, then you can use that. Okay, so we only have to configure those four things. Really, we only had to configure these two things to get this to work. So it's pretty straightforward as far as configuration you need. I've set up Identity Server a number of times, and usually there's a whole lot of little details you have to get just right to make that work. So I appreciate that this basically just has two GUIDs I have to set to get it working. We'll see if it actually works in a second, but so far that's encouraging. We've got add controllers to just make it so our controllers will work, and because we're doing an API, we don't have to add support for Razor pages or views or anything like that. So for an API project, that's what you would expect. We do have support for Swagger, so we should be able to go view Swagger. Probably Swagger is not requiring authentication, but I bet we're going to use Swagger to test this API. So we'll see if that's the case once we continue on with the quick start. So let's jump back here, and let's not get ahead of the documentation, and let's read what it says here. So on this line, when we do this, we do those two things. We read the stuff from app settings. We get the client ID, which I talked about. We get the instance, which is the STS, the Secure Token Service Endpoint, which is basically the login page that's going to be used, and it's going to issue the tokens to the client. and then the name of our tenant, or common if you just want to be able to let folks use their work or school accounts or Microsoft personal accounts. Okay. Then we jump down to the configure method, and there's two important calls you have to have there. More code, more code. But then the important ones are use authentication and authorization. Hey, thanks for the follow, Hollander, H0Len9er. Appreciate it. Okay, so I talked about these briefly in the beginning of the stream, but a bunch of you have just joined. Probably most of you know this, but just a quick review. Authentication basically asks, who are you? And authorization says, now that I know who you are, what should I let you do? What are you authorized to do? What actions can you perform? And so we need both of those for our API security to work properly inside these applications. Okay, so then we're going to look at how to protect different parts of the app. And in this case, we're looking at APIs. So we can protect controllers or controller methods, or even globally in the application, using the Authorized Attribute. This attribute restricts access to those to only authenticated users, but it doesn't do anything as far as saying what can you do out of the box, right? So it's one of the things that if I had the chance to rename this, I would name it Authenticate instead of Authorize. But it's not totally misnamed because within this attribute you can provide additional metadata that will say whether or not they're authorized to do this. So you can say they have to follow a certain profile, or they have to be in a certain role, or things like that. So it does support authorization as well, but if you don't provide it with anything, the only authorization rule it has is that I have to know who you are. You have to be authenticated. Okay, so an authentication challenge can be started to access the controller if the user isn't already authenticated. So we'll look at that when we view the app at runtime. The rest of this stuff is pretty standard. It's using the API controller attribute, which you get out of the box when you use the templates these days. That just makes sure that it's using attribute routing. It'll also do model validation for you automatically and return back a bad request if the model is not properly set up. The route is just using the default convention of the controller. So what that means is that we're going to expect to find this thing at a route of /weather forecast. And it'll just drop the suffix of controller off of that. All right, validation of scope in the controller. So the code in the API verifies that the required scopes are in the token by using verify user has any accepted scope required by the API. So at the beginning of this, when I had to do some copying of data way up here, we set up a scope, right? And we added to that scope something that said access as user. So there was a scope that said you could access this thing as a user, as opposed to as an admin or as an API or as something else, right? And so this thing here, this corresponds to that thing I specified up there at the top inside the Azure AD. And so in this, we're going to check to see if they have that scope. Otherwise, and then we're going to continue doing some additional work. So if they don't have that scope, then it's probably going to bounce them out of the API. So it says the web API will only accept tokens, 1 for users, and 2 having the access as user scope for this API. Okay, so it doesn't actually tell us to run it anywhere, but I think that that's what we should probably do next. So let's jump back here. If I were going to offer any feedback on the quick start, it would be show it running as part of the instructions. But now we run it. It's hopefully going to launch Swagger for us, which is nice. And hopefully it will actually show us something. Let's refresh. Okay, there we go. So we got our weather forecast. Now I haven't logged in at all that I know of. I still have cookies set up. I don't think I have anything else. So let's try this out, and it should probably not let me get the forecast. And in fact, it says 401, which is what I expect, I think. Right? Yeah, server response here. Response header, I want a bearer token. I give you a 401, which means you're not able to get here. Which is fine because I didn't give it a token. So if we look at the network stack on this, which maybe it was capturing while I did that, or maybe not. Let's just wipe this out. Let's execute it again. And you see we get a 401, and we look at the response headers, and it's telling us it's expecting a bearer token, but we didn't give it one. And in here, there's not a whole lot else that's too interesting. Um, and More Yeti in the chat is saying, hey, Swagger should have an auth button for Azure AD login, I guess. Well, it does have an auth typically up here at the top for anything that requires bearer tokens, but I don't see that here. So I think you're right. I think it needs to be configured to support that. I don't remember what that configuration looks like off the top of my head, but it's going to be in here. Right in here, we're going to be able to say that it's expecting a bearer token. I don't know the syntax for that off the top of my head without digging into some other code. What was it, a security definition, maybe? There's some way to say that it needs a bearer token. Add server, add security definition. What is that? Add security requirement? Maybe it's add security requirement. New requirement. These tab to accept things. These are new with Visual Studio 2022. That's pretty cool. I like that. So I just tab and it gave me all this. New security requirement of what? Is there a bearer token requirement here? I don't think I'm going to get this without looking for something on Google. So let's see. ASP.NET Core Swagger add auth UI. Let's see. Authentication using setup Swagger using add Swagger gen blah blah blah. More Yeti says add jot bearer options after add Swagger. Down which add? It's gotta be here. Swagger. More Yeti. You're saying add jot bearer and then options. I don't see. I'm not sure where you want me to do that. So let me find a add jot bearer to Swagger. There we go. And somebody says use that. Add Swagger gen. Right, there's an authorized link at the top. Do I have that? I don't have an authorized link at the top. But they got that by adding add security definition. Someone else is suggesting. I'm looking at this link right here from Paris Palzos, and they are saying that you add swashbuckle, which I'm sure we already have, and then you have these extensions that you could add, and you could add a security definition under Swagger Gen, and that looks like kind of what I want, right? And you're suggesting in the chat add security definition, so those line up, so they must be right. So let's see if that goes here. Maybe. And you need an API scheme that needs a namespace? No. No, where's that come from? What is this? Do I have these namespaces? ASP.NET Core Swagger? Microsoft ASP.NET Core. No, I don't. So why didn't it automatically grab it for me? Nope, I didn't copy it. Wait 1 second. Copy that. Bring it over here. Paste that. And yeah, these are duplicated, I know. Does that let you know what that is? No. Huh. Mine just accepts token, not good for OAuth 2. What the heck is an API scheme? What do you want here? Comma, what? Open API security scheme. Okay, so maybe it's changed its name. Maybe that's the problem. Open API. Hang on. New Open API security. There we go. Now it doesn't like these. String needs to be a parameter location. Alright. Parameter location dot header. Alright. I can manage this. I'm betting you're going to be some type thing. Type dot API key. How about that? All right. More Yeti says, can you try OAuth 2 scheme? So there's a few different schemes here. OpenAPI might not be the one I want. So let's see, OAuth2 scheme. We might try that if this one doesn't work. But let's run this again. And really all I'm looking for is to see if it has some authentication UI at the top of it. And wait for it. Paused and debug. I'm not trying to debug. What are you doing? Alright, get rid of that. That's why it must have been slow before. Let's do this again. Does not like that at all. What is it doing? Now it shows up. Alright, but look, we got an authorized thing here. Look, now we can pass an API. Alright, so perfect. Now the question is, where do I go get that token? Because it should tell me when I come here and I say try it out and I say execute, it bounces back with a 401. And if we look at our code here and we look at the actual call and it says you need a token, does not say where to go to get the token, does it? Okay, so does the thing here tell us how to do that? So recommended reading, yada yada yada. Your app registration must expose at least one scope, right? Create web API. Choose the access token version accepted by web API. Da, 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 da. Okay. Where do I go get the token? Next steps. Add authentication. Da, 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 da. Okay. Okay, yeah, I see all this works great. You're supposed to tell me where to go get the token now. Alright, so how do I get a token for Azure AD? 2 steps and access token through launch browser. I think this is what I want. Let's see. Let's bring this up here. Get an Azure AD token using Azure AD Authentication Library. Configure the app. We did that. Register the app. We did that. Add Azure Databricks. No, I don't think so. We're in the Databricks docs. That's the issue. Add permissions. We already basically did that. Request permissions. Get the token. Here we go. User password flow, programmatic. Okay, so I could do that, but authorization code flow is what I want. So I think I want that. So interactive. Obtain the authorization code which launches the browser window. That's the turn if the user successfully logs in. Use the code to access the token. So you must successfully do this. So I need to go here. You request an authorization by sending an HTTP request in the browser. Reference this for more info. Replace the fields with what you need. So there's our request. Okay. So I want to, let's do this in not the browser. More Yeti, how to integrate Swagger with Azure AD OAuth. Alright, that's helpful. Let's see, if I copy all this into Notepad first, maybe that'll be useful. So there's Notepad, we'll paste this in. Go here, client ID equals my client ID. So let's go find Visual Studio. Visual Studio has some settings. In those settings I have a client ID, GUID. Go back to here and drop the client ID in there. Now we also want it to be a response type of code. That's going to give us back our access code. Our redirect URI is going to redirect us back to wherever. We don't really care. But let's go ahead and redirect back to our Swagger location. Now we need to URL encode this. So go to some URL encoder. MyRWeb should be trustworthy enough. Put that in there and we'll encode it and grab that and go back to Notepad. and say we're going to go redirecting to this. Notice they've URL encoded here in their example, which is nice. We're doing a query, we're doing a resource. What is the resource? And then a state is some random number of other stuff, so I don't really need to worry about that. The resource, though, I'm not sure what that should be. So let's read the docs a little bit better. Here, you tell me anything about what that resource is? Is that the tenant ID? 2FF8 I think is the common tenant ID, right? Microsoft Identity Common Tenant ID. Wasn't that 2FF8? Each Azure ID is unique. Yeah. Where's the common one? I don't think this has it. Huh. Alright. We saw it earlier. If I could rewind the stream, I could go find what it was. But I think it might have been the 2FF8 resource. So I think I want my tenant ID there. That's just a guess. But I think that tenant ID needs to be there somewhere. So I think that's where it's going to go. So in here, I'm going to keep this one around. Let's see. Here's my tenant ID. And then this is the original resource ID. So we're going to take this 2FF8 out of there. We'll keep it around just for reference. We'll take my tenant ID and we'll stop and put it in there. And then we'll get rid of all the line breaks to copy it. We need to, no. We need to H. And we'll copy all that just to here so we can ditch all the line breaks. Alright, now that's all one line, I think. Yeah, alright. So then we can take all that. Finally, we could do it in some kind of HTTP tool like Fiddler, but we'll try it in the browser with an F12 network request. No, I don't want to put it in the search. I want to put it in the URL. What is all this? Clear that out. And see if this actually works. So, hey, we're having trouble signing you in. That was not what I was hoping for. Invalid input was received from the user. Alright. Well, shoot. What went wrong? So get, pass all this in, request, error. There's all my query string parameters. I don't know if that's the right resource ID. Huh. Alright, where's the... What did I miss? Alright, we're going through these steps. We set everything up that requires a token. This is all configured correctly. Protecting the thing, it's protected. It's got an authorize on it. If I go look at the code in here and we look at this controller, you see it's authorized. It's got some data. Here's where it's going to actually check to see that I have the scope that's required, and then it just gives me the response. So that's all fine. Nothing in here says where to go get the token that I've seen. Nothing in the configuration says where to go get the token. I gotta go get the token from somewhere. So, do I have to just be logged in? That's the part I'm missing. That's the feedback I'm going to give on this quick start is you kind of just left me right here. It's like, okay, you're going to validate scope and then you're done. Like, okay. How do I get the token? And I think they need like 2 more steps here. Go get the token and run the app. See help and support. No, I don't want that. Alright. Hello, WG Gaffa in the chat. Tell me So if anyone knows, how do I get an Azure AD jot token? Jot token for a particular tenant. All right, access tokens. Let's go learn about access tokens. Custom APIs registered there. Okay, so maybe the link I need is actually in here. That'd be a good spot for it, right? So there's endpoints, preview features, get started, build your application, call APIs, view API permissions, configure, view all quick starts. All right, sign in users in 5 minutes. Sign in users, call APIs in a few minutes. Okay, well that sounds great. Let's do that. I want to do a single page application, I guess, on, I don't know, it doesn't really matter. Let's do that. Okay, so go get a subscription, set these things up, do that, download the project, run the app. Here's how it works. Go here. Yeah, I don't have that though. I'm not actually running a client. API permissions, there's that. Morgetti's got some help for me. He says your URL was okay, but you needed to actually do a post, not a get. That makes sense to me now. Thank you. So let's go back to this, and I want to post this. So we'll copy that and go to Postman, I guess. And Postman, I just want to create one new query. Postman always wants me to set everything up in a collection, but we're going to create one new query. Let's see if I can hide all that stuff. That sounds good. Let's do close. Okay, that looks fine. So new tab. Need to make sure I'm not exposing any secrets here on the stream. We're going to do this, but we're going to change it up and we're going to do a post because Morgetti is helping me out. And you're missing a tenant in the URL. Alright, so it wasn't the thing I thought it was. So we'll send this, and it says, hey, sign into your account. Okay, and that's because of the flow that I'm choosing to use, I think. So this is not good because now I've just gotten a bunch of HTML that I've got to try and work with. So if I post that, here's what folks in the chat are helping me with. Ilaru is saying, let's do a post to this with your tenant ID. My tenant ID is this, so I can take that and put it right there. Now I'm assuming I have to already be logged in or it's going to redirect me, right? So if I take this and we put it in place of what I was doing with the OAuth thing, we'll do just that. We'll try that, send. And it didn't include the grant type, right? So that's not sufficient to do it. So what I had before was this one, and this one didn't have the grant type either. Just said mode was query. So your first URL is missing tenant, right? Yeah, so there's another client flow get a token. Thank you. Open that URL. So here we go. So this one says use Postman. Hey, that's what I'm doing. Access a token request with a shared secret. Use post to this host for whack tenant, whack whatever. Okay. So show me an example. Replace tenant with your thing. Okay. So -d. You don't have tenant in here anywhere. There it is. Okay, so that's where my tenant ID goes. Alright, I got that. So I will take this. That's what you sent me. Line 1, a notepad needs to replace tenant ID with your ID. Yeah. Okay. line 1 in Notepad, right? Oh, look at that. Oh, look at that. Oh, I'm an idiot. Thank you, everybody. That, not that. That needs to be that. All right, I did miss that, that was another thing I needed to replace. I saw the client ID on that line, but I didn't see the tenant right there. So let's fix it there too. And I don't see tenant anywhere now. So just to make sure, right? It's only in that one spot. Okay, good. It's allowed to be there. That's where I want it. Okay, so now we have hopefully the right link, and we'll go into Postman. And if you can actually type the right things into the URL correctly and send it, then you still get this sign-in page. All right, so then what do I do with that? I can't sign in through Postman, can I? Show me a preview. Wow. It's not helpful. Shoot. Okay. So let's do the one that was supposed to work with Postman, which was over here. And this was just posting to tenant OAuth 2 yada yada yada. So that was this. So I think this will be perhaps the one I need. So copy this back to Notepad. I think it's exactly the one I just have on the line above it. Take that, put it in there. Notepad's horrible at double clicking. Put it there. Yeah, it's the same. Alright, so we'll just grab this here, go back to Postman, replace all with that, and send that one. And we get an invalid request. Body must contain the parameter grant type. Okay, let's go to those docs and see what they're telling me. They're saying, I don't see grant. There it is, grant type, client credentials. Okay, so we need tenant, client ID, scope, client secret, grant type, all required. Fine. I can do that. So this, we'll just copy and throw that into Postman in the body here. Raw, paste, get rid of line breaks. Okay, we get client credentials, client secret, which I haven't set up, scope, which I don't have set up, and the client ID, which I do have. So I can go find my client ID, which is not listed here yet. I guess I can just pull it from Visual Studio. Content type needed to be form URL encoded. Yes, probably. So here, my client ID is F93. Copy that. Back to here. Client ID. That. Alright, scope is that. Client secret is something that's probably not right. And let's see what that does. Request body must contain grant type. It does. Coded. That's not good. Do I need to encode these ampersands? I don't think I do. Let me copy that back into Notepad, so I don't have it there, and pull Notepad off where I can see it, and go to form data like this, and do it key by key. Example reference that type to. Did it. Yeah, theoretically I should be able to copy this and paste it right into Postman and import it as text. Request the certificate, I'm not doing that. Alright, so client ID is that, directory is that, post content type should be application XURL form URL encoded. Okay, so let's try it again. Let's go here, XURL encoded. I think I need to put in each key value pair by hand though, so I need to say client ID has a value of, and then paste in F93 client ID like that, right? And then scope, and scope is encoded, but it's this, right? And then I don't know what this is. I think I need to set it to something. And you're saying sample credentials, but then grant type, which is client credentials, right? If you use the bulk edit option, you may be able to paste. Yeah, okay, there it is. I was trying to look for that, but I didn't see it until you mentioned that. But we've got it now. Let's see what it tells me. It should tell me that the client credentials are wrong, but it instead is saying invalid scope. And that's because that's not the scope that I set up, probably. So, provided value for scope is not valid. Client credential flows must have a scope value with /dot default suffix to the resource identifier. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, so in my setup for Azure AD over here, I set up a scope right here, and that's my scope. So maybe I can copy that and paste that into Postman as my scope. Maybe. Tab, paste. That looks like maybe that'll work. I don't know. Let's try it. No, it doesn't like that. Scope API is not valid. Must have a scope with the /default thing. Right, okay. So where do I get one of those? Define custom scopes to do the things. There's my scope. There's the thing. Access as user. Do I need that? That doesn't have /default either, though. This is exactly the thing I copied. You can encode that scope. Okay. But it didn't look like it was an encoding problem, right? It read it. It spit it right back to me on just as I passed it. So it doesn't seem like it was not encoded properly. It seems like it doesn't have this .default suffix. Do I need to say .default? Do I need to say /.default? Ah, that's progress. Invalid client secret. Okay, so apparently you just have to manually append /.default, which is what it told us. So must add /.default to API : scope. All right. Now we need a client secret. Interesting, interesting. So if I want to just have a shared client secret for this thing, which is, I guess, the type of structure we're doing, I have to set that somewhere. So probably a client ID would be necessary. Let's get this out of here. Where do I set up a client secret? Certificates and secrets, client secrets. Secret string the app uses to prove the identity when requesting a token, also referred to as an application password. Alright, so in the docs, they had a client secret of sample credentials. I think that sounds like a perfectly secure client secret for API. I'd like to give it a value. So add it, and then I give it to a value. Where's the value? Oh, it gave me a value. Okay, interesting. I guess I'll use their value. So there's their client secret that they're going to give me, and I'm going to put it right here. And then we're going to send, and it's an invalid request. Cross origin is permitted only for a single page application. Okay, it's auto-generated certificates and secret plate. Yeah, got it. Okay, so error description. Cross origin token redemption is permitted only for single page application client type. Okay, client type. Where did I set the client type? Must be on my backend client. Okay, what did I tell you you were? Client type. Where's my client? This is my client. Overview. Client type. Client type. I have a secret. Expose an API. Client type. Nothing in here says client type. Maybe I need a client type. Add a client application. Okay. Authorized scope. Okay. Add it. Client ID. I don't know. Sure. Use Let's call this my spa. Nope, has to be a valid GUID. Okay, give me one. Provide the application the client you'd like to authorize. I don't know. I guess the client ID is here. I guess. I thought I was already in here. Alright, add an application. Okay, now can I configure this application to have a client type of spa, right? Like how do I get this? It's only permitted for client type of single page application. Where do I set the client type? Need to create a new client type for it. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. But how do I create a single page application client type? How do I create a single page application client type Azure AD? Register a single page application. There we go. So the docs for that say here, create the app registration, go through here, new registration, supported types, do not enter a redirect URL. So maybe I entered a redirect URL when I created this. Name, okay, configure, select single page application. So manage authentication, add a platform. In the Azure portal, select the thing, go to manage authentication, add a platform. Alright. Manage authentication, add a platform. Aha, single page application, perhaps. Right, single page application. Do not enter. Under redirect URLs, enter a redirect. Do not select the checkbox for implicit grant or hybrid flows. Okay. I don't know, whatever the app redirect URL was. I've lost it. If I run this thing, let's see, is it there? No. I have too many browsers open at this point. Is it there? No. Oh yeah, there it is. Swagger. That's my redirect URL. Alright, so go to Swagger. Front channel logout. I don't really have one. We'll go there. Again, I guess we'll say logout. I don't think that's actually going to work. Select the tokens you would like to be issued. I definitely need an access token, don't I? Request a token directly from the authorization endpoint. If the application has a single page architecture and doesn't use authorization code flow, or if it involves a web API with JavaScript, select both. For ASP.NET Core web apps and others that use hybrid, select only ID. So I definitely want this, and it probably won't hurt for me to follow this. So let's configure that one. But before I confirm that check mark, what does this thing say? Do not select either checkbox under implicit grant and hybrid flows. Implicit, do not select. Okay, you said not to. Fine. I don't know why you say not to. You've now configured the registration redirect, which client will registration will be sent. Do I trust this thing? I don't think I trust this thing. I think I want that checkbox. I want an access token. Configure. Alright, so single page application. I think this was what I needed. This was missing from the quick start, I think. Let's go back to Postman, and let's see. I didn't specify that client anywhere though. So yeah, still gonna get this permitted only for single page application client type. So my client ID is that. I don't think I've fully got this thing wired up yet to work. So this authentication, support accounts, that's fine. Allow public client flows. Oh, I didn't finish this. That's why it's not working yet. I don't know. Sure. Maybe not. Let's say yes. We'll save this. Alright. So that's all good. And so if I go back to the overview, I have an application client ID. I have a certificate. I have a client secret set with an ID. I exposed an API. I don't think I wired up the API to use the client secret anywhere. add a client application, which has a different client ID. So that's, well, no, I use the same one. API permissions. That's fine. Token configuration. I didn't add any extra claims. Optional claims can be added. Okay. We didn't do anything with branding. No logos. We're not verified. Alright, so the question I have is, when I hit that endpoint, so what if I don't check that? Does that matter? It told me I shouldn't. Turning off implicit grant will disable them. Yeah, that's fine. So what does that do for me? Send. Alright, it still doesn't like it. Somehow you need to specify the client with the SPA, says Morigetti. I agree. Brainwash is asking, will this whole stream be uploaded to YouTube? Yes. Yes, it will. So if you're just joining, we're trying to get the last bit working for creating a token through Azure AD to access a secured API. So we've secured the API, and the API is working. I mean, it's being secured. And so if we try and hit this API endpoint, which we can do in Swagger, here we can say execute the API, and we get this 401. And if we take this curl request right here and we bring it into Postman, we can say import from text right there, and there's our curl request. We can send that, and we should get the 401, which you see right there, 401 not authorized, which is the same thing we were getting in Swagger. It's saying, hey, I want a bearer token. So we can go to authorization headers, or authorization, add a bearer token. What does that look like? I guess I'll just add as a header. So authorization, and then the value is bearer, colon, and then whatever your token is. Like that. And this is going to say, hey, I still don't know who you are, but yeah, you've got a bearer token. Let's see. Brainwash says, yeah, I missed a huge chunk of the stream, and I'm very interested in this topic, which is why I asked. Thank you. Cool. And Claire says, you bound client ID and application ID at some side panel. You just copied client at GUID. Maybe you need to copy client application ID instead of client ID. Maybe. Somebody tell me what I'm forgetting here for... Is it OAuth 2 that I need? I thought there was an easy way to do authorization here. That didn't involve doing it by hand here, but for some reason it's not showing up. Anyway, let's go back to my configuration in Azure, because I'm pretty sure this is where I've messed something up. And also I think where the quick start left me hanging. But I do need an access token for sure. Okay, and we got past the errors, the original errors up to one we're at. And the current error that we're seeing when we try and post on here is it's saying that this is only permitted for a single page application client type. I didn't specify a client type anywhere, but I did specify a client ID. My client ID is F93C. None of the rest of that is helpful, right? Yeah. So my client type should be somewhere in here. So I have a client ID, F93C. I have redirect with one SPA redirect URI, I guess. This thing doesn't have its own client ID anywhere that I see. So it's not that. Stop filling that out. Okay, the object ID, I don't know what that is. Tenant ID, I don't think I need. Supported account types is only my organization. I could change that to be any Windows account, or any Microsoft account rather, but I don't think that helps me. Application ID URI is the same as this, but with API in front of it, so that's not really helpful, I don't think. We looked at branding, there was nothing there. We added this, We could add more platforms for other things, but single page application seems to be what it says it wants. We added a secret that we're passing, and that's not, that didn't get us there either. We exposed our API here. It doesn't have its own ID, it does have a scope. We gave it a client ID here, and it wanted a GUID. And I said, here, use the one I've already got. But maybe I can delete this and give it a different one. This client ID, provide the application ID of the client application that you would like to authorize. Where do I register a client application if it's not this thing? So I think this is the API, this is the server. The client application would be my spa, right? So do I have to add a client application? I mean, that's what this says. All right, authorizing a client application indicates this API trusts the application and users should not be asked to consent when the client calls this API. All right, so I've got a scope that says these people. I've got a client ID, which is F93C. I'm passing in client ID F93C here, but nowhere do I say that F93C is a client type of single page application. Do I just tell it here? Is that all it needs? Client type is single page application. Like, that would be too easy, but no. Alright, so that's not it. Get rid of that. Cross origin redemption. Alright, let's just Google for this. That. And we'll come over here. We'll Google for this. And it'll say Azure App Registration caused the following error. Okay. How do I fix it? And struggle to find anything about this, blah blah blah. And they say follow steps here. And as for the doc, it needs to be configured as a web app. Updating spa doesn't make sense. It needs to be a web, not a spa. Please use web, blah blah blah. Azure's a web. Still getting the error. It says it's only permitted for a single page. 2 cases for token, 1 web and spa. Spa is actually a code for Pixie, so it's proof key certificate exchange. When using spa, Azure Identity requires a token redemption. It comes from the browser. Okay. Maybe if I switch to web, it'll magically work. Let's try that. So let's go back to overview, redirects, add a platform. Let's say it's web, enter redirect URL. We'll give it the same one as this, and configure it. Redirects must have distinct values. It's distinct. Okay, update successful. This app has implicit grant. If you're using any of the URLs in the spa, you should migrate the URLs. Okay. Which app is this? Single page. Here's the web. Having a web app is not going to help me though, right? Because it specifically is saying it needs to be a single page application. So I don't think that's going to do it. Go to Postman, send it again. It still says that, right? So what I do with might come from the grant type, says More Yeti. And Claire says, does it mean to be scope and client ID to be the same? Is it meant to be like that? I don't know. I suspect it's not, but I didn't know what else to put there, and it wanted a GUID, and I didn't want to just make one up, so I used the client ID, but perhaps that's a bad plan. Alright, so the web thing didn't help, so let's get rid of that. That was what that support request said. I've lost that tab. where we were looking for that. There it is. So let's see. Getting access tokens from Postman. Okay, that sounds like what I'm doing, right? So we're trying to use Pixie with Azure AD and Postman. The app is all registered in Azure AD, and we're using Postman described here, trying to get a token. All right, and we get this. Hey, that's what I'm getting. That sounds familiar. How do we get this token from Postman? And this is the problem: is documentation is confusing. Open Azure AD. Make sure you redirect URL over to the mobile and desktop category. It looks like you need to add a redirect URL under single page apps, but this is not true. Okay, well, let's try that. So if we go here and we say add a platform, and we're going to do mobile and desktop, and URI will accept as destination returning authentication tokens. Add some checkboxes. I guess we'll do that. That's fine. We could add a custom redirect URL. That could be this thing again, which will be, we'll say desktop. Configure that. Okay, so now we have mobile and desktop, and let's see if that gets Postman working. So we'll send it, and it didn't change anything. Okay. Still using client credentials, still passing our secret, still using our scope with the /default, still passing in their client ID, which is the same one. Maybe the client ID shouldn't be the same, someone said. So let's go check that out under API permissions, expose an API, client. Let's delete this client. Yes, deleted. Let's create a new client. It wants some GUID. So I need to generate a GUID, and free online GUID, generate a GUID. There it is. Take that and stick it in here. And so EFCB is authorized with that scope. We'll add that. And it says, hey, you can't do that. Failed to update Azure property thing references this. It cannot be found. Okay, so I can't just pick some random GUID, apparently. Has to be non-empty. It has to be the application ID that you would like to authorize. Alright, so I'm back to, I think it needs to be this. Alright, so that worked. Alright, and that's tying it to itself, essentially. I don't have another client. I don't have any other client set. I don't have a way to create a client, right? I mean, other than this, I don't see where I do it. Alright. I'm sure this is something simple that I'm just missing, but there's got to be a way to use Postman to get this thing. Problem documentation. Okay, this one says this error can occur when the origin header is missing from the request. Try adding an origin. Alright, this has 0 upvotes, but let's try it. So we come in here, we go to headers, and we say origin is whatever, localhost. Send it. Boom. Origin : is not a thing. Yeah. Fair enough. Send it again. Nope, that didn't help. We could downvote them if we wanted to be mean, but we won't do that. I was able to resolve this by going to the Azure portal, going to app registration, to authentication under manage. Within your single page, add the following redirect URI to go to postman.io/callback. Alright, that's interesting. Since we're trying to use Postman, let's try that. So we'll go back to here, and maybe this is all an issue just because I'm trying to use Postman, right? Maybe it's totally on me for using this crazy third-party app called Postman instead of just using Swagger. So in here, I can add a URI, and I can say, hey, use Postman, and save that. Okay. And then in Postman, try and send it. And I get the same behavior. Save these changes in the Azure portal. Next, within Postman's new token configuration, manually set the callback URL to the same URI specified above. How do I do that? New token configuration. Once you are done, clear cookies from Postman and reattempt. Alright, Sounds good. Thanks for the follow, XLaserX. Manually set the callback URL in Postman. Okay, somebody tell me, where would I set the callback URL in Postman? I don't know what that is. Settings, callback URL. I appreciate these detailed instructions from BlueJay IT, but I don't know where to do that. Postman set callback URL. Authorizing request, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So, callback URL, advanced parameters under something. Authorization, OAuth, something or other. Okay. Advanced parameters, callback URL. So this is under OAuth 1.0, maybe? Which I did not set up. If we go to authorization and we say OAuth, and then there's some advanced parameters somewhere, callback URL. Get access token, callback URL. Look at that. It's no way to set it. Request new access token to add to your tokens. You know, I really just want to make a request. So maybe the callback URL is just a header. Nope. Never mind. So try this one. App get postman OAuth2 callback says brainwashed. All right. But I still don't know where to put it. All right. This redirect. Do this. Let's say add a comment. Where exactly would one specify the callback URL in a Postman post request to get a token? He says, not expecting a response immediately. To get a refresh token, do this. You should first get the code in a browser, and the following information in a browser bar. Get the obtained code. To get the access token, please check this. And you get this error still. Alright, well, let's go see if this thing's useful. Microsoft Identity Platform OAuth2 authorization code flow. Okay. There's the diagram. Request an authorization code. This is kind of like what we did. This does not say whether we're doing a get or a post. So authorization code begins the client directing the user to the /authorize endpoint. Permissions, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So do this for your tenant, for your client, with a redirect URI back to your app, with a scope, with some code challenge. Right, so this looks just like a Pixie request that I've done in Identity Server 100 times. And I was commenting earlier in the stream how nice it was that things were so easy to do with Azure AD, but this part is reminding me how many details there have to be when you're trying to get the proof key for code exchange protocol working, because you have to specify these code challenges and code challenge methods and all that stuff. But if you get a successful response, it'll look like this, and you'll have this code. And once you have the code, then you have to pass that somewhere else to finish the whole handshake. And that's what this is showing here at the top, is this protocol diagram indicating how this works, right? First you go to the authorized endpoint, and then you go to the token endpoint to get the actual token, and only then can you go talk to your web API to validate the token. Now, it doesn't necessarily help me with what I'm trying to do, which if we back up a little bit, we're here, and we're just trying to get a token that we can use that has access as user scope on it that will let me into this API. And add this, call downstream. I'm just trying to refresh my memory and see if I missed anything here, because I don't think I did. Right? I mean, this is the whole thing. Configure the thing. set it up. Like there's not another step here that I see. Maybe I needed to go under single page app or something and set up the application here. Register, manually configure application and code sample. Download the project, configure all the things. I don't know. That's what I want. Brainwash. Single page apps may receive an invalid request error indicating that cross-origin token redemption is permitted only for single page apps. This indicates that the redirect URI used to request the token has not been marked as a SPA redirect URI. Review the application registration steps to enable this flow. Okay, Brainwashed. I don't know where you got that information from, but it does sound like it could be helpful. So then the question is, if we go back to here, I gave it this redirect URI, and you're saying it has not been marked as a SPA redirect URI. Right, yeah, I probably do already have it open. Let's open it again anyway, though. Yeah, okay, so this is that page I was just looking at. In the note section, permitted only for, alright, so let's just search for single dash page application. Right, so if you attempt to use the authorization code flow and see this error, alright, yeah, that's what I'm seeing. No, it's not actually. No, I'm not getting cores. That's not my error. Where's the other place? Here, this note. Single page apps may receive invalid request error indicating cross-origin token redemption is permitted only for this. This indicates the redirect URI used to request the token has not been marked as a SPA redirect URI. Review the application registration steps to do that. Alright. Review the application setup steps. Redirect URI setup. Alright. Follow the instructions creating to correctly mark your redirect URIs as enabled for cores. Okay. To update an existing to enable for cores, open the manifest editor and set the type field for your redirect to SPA in the reply URLs. Okay. You can also click on the URL in the web section of the authentication tab and select the URLs you want to migrate to use. Okay. That sounds great. Now if I go into Azure, that's not Azure. That's not Azure. That's still not Azure. Did I lose Azure? Here it is. Alright, so if we go right here, show me where I would mark these things that way. I don't see anywhere that it was saying that I could do what it just said. Right? It said to do this, open the manifest editor and set the type field of the redirect URI. Alright, manifest editor? What the heck is a manifest editor? Manifest. Do this using the manifest. Okay, that's helpful. It tells me that I can do it with the manifest editor. That's this. There's the manifest. Hey, alright. Oh, look at that. The editor allows you to update things. Okay. That's progress. Localhost. Interesting. Reply URLs. There's that. Okay. Let's read that again. Open the manifest, set the type field for the redirect URL to SPA in the reply URLs with type. This would have benefited from a link or a screenshot. Okay, reply URLs with type SPA, type. I don't know, I thought I said it was SPA for some of these. That's SPA. Let's just make them all SPA. You get a SPA, and you get a SPA, and you get a SPA. Save. Alright, they're all SPA. Make it work. No. Still need to be a single page application for this client with that scope, with that secret, with that grant. Yeah, there's something in this I'm missing. But perhaps I will go figure it out, and on the next stream I'll describe what the issue was. So there's something in here that I don't have configured properly. And once I figure it out, I will also be sure to make a pull request to this quick start, because I think I want to add a section right about here that says, hey, go get a token and call this API and make it work. Because otherwise this thing is not going to work. Alright, can I get a token if I'm common, I wonder? I'll try that too. But this stream's gone on long enough. I don't want to waste your time with me continuing to try and troubleshoot this. It might be worthwhile to see how I'm troubleshooting, but it's mostly going to be involving Googling, and you've seen enough of that already. So let me see if Visual Studio or one of the other Microsoft accounts are up and running that we can raid and send you off to some other awesome .NET content. But otherwise, let me just leave you with a last reminder here that you want to go check out the 425show.dev. Be sure to hit this link before you go. I would appreciate it. It's got some additional upcoming shows. It'll be a place to see where I'm going to be streaming next about this, which I expect to be next Friday, but could be sooner. If I get this sorted out, later on today, I might do another stream like this this weekend and talk through what I've sorted out. But the schedule will be on the bottom of that 425show.dev. So check that out. And like I was saying, let me go see if there's any live coders that are online. So if you go to livecoders.dev, I don't see any Visual Studio type people, but maybe Clarkio would appreciate a few people rating him. Just verify and make sure that twitch.tv/Visual Studio is not live right now. I'm pretty sure they're not. Nope, they're offline. All right. So yeah, let's offer a mega raid over to Clarkio. There's this Xbox ad that it keeps wanting to show. So thanks for spending some of the afternoon here with me. I'm going to go ahead and send you over to Clarkio, if I can find my creator dashboard and do it. Where's the raid button? Raid channel. Pick someone. Clarkio. Start the raid. Alright, don't forget to hit the 425show.dev. If you found this at all interesting, please follow me on Twitch or Twitter or wherever you like. And with that, have a great weekend. Thanks.